So when you started doing this, besides paying rent, I have to assume, what's your intention? What did you
Well,
want
it
from
didn't
all of
pay
this?
rent. I think the
Well,
first
none of
Food
those
Lab
jobs
article I
did.
wrote was I got paid $30 for it, which was $5 more than the going rate at the time for, like those early blogs, they had very little budget and they relied on people who just wanted to, practice writing and get their writing out there. So no, really it was because, I'd been working in the restaurant industry for a long time. I was cooking around Boston and, and I thought this is a pretty unsustainable lifestyle, working on your feet every day, getting drunk every night, like going to work hungover. And, it just wasn't a very healthy environment and something that I kind of wanted to escape. And so I transitioned over to writing as sort of like the escape route from cooking all the time. But, I managed to find a job cooking and writing at the same time. And then, and I was doing that at Cooks Illustrated magazine for a few years. And then the reason I moved over to writing online was that, with magazines and you've written for magazines and you've written for sort of print publications before. And, it's very different from writing online because you have to have this sort of specific voice that's not necessarily your voice. It's the voice of the publication. And you're also kind of restricted to, the size of the page, like the physical constraints of the page. So if they say 600 words, it has to be 600 words. And so writing online, I felt like gave me an avenue to write whatever I wanted and make it as long as I wanted and get it to a much broader audience. And that's one of the nice things about writing online or these days making videos or podcasts or whatever is that, whatever niche you find, you're going to find some kind of audience for it, as long as you do a good quality product. There are people who are interested in everything. So if you want to write 3,000 words about hard boiling an egg, it turns out there's like people who want to read that.
Who knew? You did.
No, I had no idea. When I wrote that first article, I had no idea that it was going to become a popular thing or turn into a book. It was just like, this is a fun thing to do. And, I'm very lucky in that I got into the industry at the right time in the right place. It was sort of the dawn of food blogging in the online world, and people were transitioning away from traditional media to online media. So I got in there right at sort of the right time. And then as far as like the subject matter goes, it was just, I wrote what I was interested in. And luckily it turns out there's other people who are interested in that as well.
We look at articles like the ones that you were writing, and it from the perspective of today, it's like, how to make the perfect boiled egg.
Yeah.
And but that was and the approach that you took was so different at the time than what everyone else was doing. And I wonder, how much of that do you feel like was that you had this very non-elitist, it really wasn't like the other food bloggers that we were
Mhm.
reading at the time. And do you think that like the personality that you put into it made a difference, or did that come later?
No, well, the type of subjects I was considering were, it's like when I was working in restaurants, I had questions all the time, and generally, especially back then, it's a little different now in restaurants than it is back then. But back then, the answer was always like, it's like, why do we do it this way? And the answer is like, because that's what the chef said, and it's just like this very sort of militaristic, regimented thing where you did what you were told, and there wasn't really time to ask questions. And so, over the course of my restaurant career, I had, yeah, like a big list of questions that I wanted to answer. And so, Serious Eats kind of gave me that opportunity. But really, the voice and the subject matter. Again, I got lucky meeting Ed Levine, who was the found. He was a New York Times writer. He's done a bunch of things in his life, but he was a food writer, and he had this sort of very democratic, inclusive voice, where he loved hot dogs and he loved hamburgers, but he also loved fancy restaurants. And sort of the ethos of Serious Eats was that we take the food very seriously, no matter what it is, whether it's a burger from In-N-Out or a tasting menu from Per Se. And so we take the food very seriously, but we don't take ourselves very seriously, because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's all just food. And so I found that approach really appealing. And so I would definitely say like the voice that I landed on and that I kind of use today was very much shaped by what Ed was doing at Serious Eats. He was doing it in the context of restaurant reviews and sort of chef news and food news. And he hired me to bring recipes to the site. And so it was, how do we take that sort of inclusive voice and bring it to recipe writing and, technical food writing?